Hello ladies and gentlemen, or guys. It's the 16th of January today. Lovely sunny day, blue sky. Little bit cold, but better than it's been. Back on my favourite subject, compost. And I want to talk today about what happens when a heap goes anaerobic. So I'm going to sort of explain how a heap goes anaerobic, what causes it to go anaerobic, what the dangers of anaerobic compost are, and how we can fix it. Well, how do you know if your heap has gone anaerobic? Well, the reason I'm doing this video is because this illustrates it absolutely perfectly. You may have seen on one of my last videos I was comparing compost made at sort of 4-week intervals, and I had 2 batches in this storage bin. The bottom batch was, you know, the oldest compost, about 14-15 weeks old. Lovely stuff. Well, I wanted to turn the bin so that the ready compost on the bottom was here on the top, which I did in the video, but I left some in this bin because this bin was piled up here. Now yesterday I came and there was about a foot of compost left in the bottom of this bin, and what I should have done when I turned that heap was put that stuff into bags or store it away from this area. Because we've had so much rain, this ground has become really saturated. Then we got the cold freezing conditions which froze the water in the ground. Then we got all the snow, and as the snow melted, that water came up. It couldn't penetrate the ground because it was frozen. So we got a heaving of water into the ground, and the compost that was in the bottom of this storage bin here got absolutely drenched. It was also frozen solid virtually on the surface. So when it when it thawed out a little bit, I thought I'm going to, because this had sunk since filling, I thought, well, I can just put that on here now. And as I started digging and just getting to the bottom, I noticed the foul smell, and that foul smell is compost that's going anaerobic. Now in this case, because this compost was finished, it was made, I suppose in a way it's a different sort of it's in a different sort of anaerobic state, because when I dug this up, it's this stuff, this is what came off the bottom. You can see it's all wet and sticky. Yeah, the day before yesterday when I turned this, I could smell it, and the smell has gone now, but the smell was the same sort of smell if you was digging. Let's say you was clearing your pond and you was getting all the slime and sludge off the bottom of the pond. That is what this had started to smell like. In that state, there is no air in it because the water had come up. Also what had happened, the sheet that was covering this compost, we'd had some wind, it had blown off. It poured down with rain one night and the water just saturated straight through into the bin. That's my fault. I should have paid more attention. But yeah, so the stuff on the bottom of this bin had gone anaerobic of a fashion. So how does a compost heap go anaerobic when it's actively rotting down? And I will say that possibly hot bins are more prone to this rather than open heaps, although it can happen in open heaps quite easily. What causes it to go anaerobic in a hot bin first? Probably the main reason is you're putting the wrong ingredients in the hot bin, or you're putting too much green matter in the hot bin. So a lot of green vegetation with very little brown in it, grass clippings, cardboard, paper, all that sort of stuff. As the bin heats up, a massive amount of heat is trapped in the bin. The moisture coming off the green material can't get out of the bin, so it stays trapped in the material. As it heats up, it starts to slump, and in hot bins it happens really fast. The heat is concentrated throughout the entire bin, so the whole bin shrinks, it compacts, and it pushes air out. And as soon as it pushes that air out, the anaerobic bacteria start to take over and multiply. And you'll know this because you will get a feel for hot bins and conventional compost bins. You'll get smells coming off the bin, sort of like rotting eggs, you know, sulphurous smells, ammonia smells, things like that. That is bad. If you start to smell things like that, you need to fix it straight away. So the answer to filling a hot bin is is get the right balance of materials. You want drier materials and you want wet materials. Also, don't layer. I know I say put a layer of brown and a layer of green, but I also periodically I will put the fork in the hot bin and I will just turn it, so I will mix the green and those brown layers. I've maybe put 4 bands in like that. I will then dive the fork in, I will turn it all over and I will mix it together, and it stops that compression and banding happening in a conventional bin and a hot bin. So that is why hot bins go anaerobic. If you're noticing that smell in your hot bin and you've been putting too much green in, I would advise you to tip the whole bin out and then mix in some dry plant material, straw or dried plant material. I don't advise you to use cardboard and paper too much, although you know it's good for a compost bin. But the trouble is it compresses really easy, cardboard and paper. As the cardboard gets soggy, it just gets completely flattened by the weight of the material and it can't hold air. Whereas a bank of straw, it will compress to a certain extent, but the straw itself has air gaps, or the straw itself is hollow and contains air, and it's less like it's going to take longer to completely push the air out of that straw, or plant material for that matter. It's going to happen in a conventional heap to the same extent really, and it's probably going to happen in the middle of your conventional compost bin. And I would say that probably the way you're going to cause it to go anaerobic is by piling tons and tons of grass clippings in. And you'll know this if you've put a massive amount of grass clippings in on a compost pile. It heats up really quick, and if you scrape the surface away after a few days, you will see this black slimy mess at the bottom that smells. That is now anaerobic, and you need to mix that up. You need to sort that out and get some dry material in it to dry it out and keep air in the comp. What is the problem with a bin going anaerobic? It's bad. It's really bad. As a bin goes anaerobic, it starts to gas off all the elements that you need in the compost bin, like nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, whatever is in the material you're putting in that bin. The anaerobic conditions start to gas off those elements that you want in the bin. So you're actually making really very, very poor grade compost, and it will look black and beautiful, it will stink, but it's really, really poor grade. The other thing is it's that compost is not only dangerous for your soil and your plants, it's also dangerous for you, because there's many nasty pathogens in anaerobic compost or anaerobic silt or anaerobic soil. They thrive in that, so it's dangerous for your health. If you've got cuts on your hand, or you somehow get it into your mouth through contact, through whatever, there can be nasty things in anaerobic compost that you don't want anywhere in your body. It's bad for the soil, because if you're a fan of digging and you're dropping anaerobic compost in a trench and covering it, that anaerobic compost stays anaerobic for a long time, because it's now devoid of air because you've put soil back on it. So it stays anaerobic for quite a long time. As your roots go into that anaerobic compost, the anaerobic compost is full of pathogens and diseases that your plants don't like it. Your plant roots need oxygen. If your plant's roots are going into anaerobic compost, there's very little oxygen in it. There's also some nasty stuff in anaerobic compost, nasty bacteria that will actively attack your plants. Anaerobic compost is also heavily, as I've just said, heavily drained of nutrients and things that are good for your soil. Anaerobic compost that is still anaerobic and still smelly, the fact that it is still smelly tells you it's still decaying. What's coming off that is ammonia, things like ammonia and sulphur, which will, as it's rising back through the soil onto your plants, will kill your plants, will damage them. If you put an anaerobic compost around your plants, like on a no-dig system, again, the gas is coming off, will damage your plants. The way to make anaerobic compost safe again is to just spread it out somewhere. I wouldn't put it on the ground where you're growing things, but I would maybe spread it out on a sheet and let some air get back into it. And when the smell is gone, like this is only taken 2 days, and it just smells beautiful again. Forest floor smell, as it was before the rain saturated it. Let the air get in, keep mixing it about, and when the smell is completely gone, you can then use that. It might take 3 days, it might take a week, depending on how much you've got and what rotten state it's in. But you just don't want to make anaerobic compost. You really don't. It's bad for your soil. Now, as I have said, this started to go anaerobic with the smell. It doesn't smell now, and it's lovely compost. You can see it. It doesn't smell. The reason it's become aerobic really quickly is because the compost was already made. So the thermophilic, the mesophilic, all the bacteria have worked through this and almost completely broken it down into compost. And that smell from just being saturated with water has just pushed the air out, and it started to get into that anaerobic state. But it is now absolutely fine. You know, the fact that when I was digging it out, it was full of worms was a good sign to me. So if your compost goes completely anaerobic, you're probably not going to find many worms in it, because again, worms need oxygen. They do not like anaerobic conditions. Your plant roots don't. We don't. Nothing does. So if hot bins tend to go anaerobic, why do I like them so much, and why do I persist with them? And as I've just said, you will learn as you start filling hot bins. You will learn how to manage them and what to add to them to prevent them going anaerobic and producing really good compost. They make amazing compost, hot bins. And I would say, stick my neck out and say probably better than a conventional bin. And the reason I stick with hot bins is because of the speed of the decomposing, but mainly because the heat, the sustained heat, destroys plant pathogens, plant diseases, plant pests and weed seed. That is my main goal. And it's been important to me because I've been trying to, all these years, these last 2 to 3 years, I've been trying to get as much organic matter into this soil because it was really so depleted. There was virtually no carbon left in it. So I have been composting anything I can get hold of, everybody's weeds, everybody's junk off the site, you know, full of weed seed. This site was full of weed seed when I built the first hot bin and filled it up. Nothing came out of that except beautiful compost, which was put back on the ground. But I think I've reached a stage now, this will be year 3 in June, where I've got plenty of carbon and organic matter in the soil now for the bacteria and the fungus to thrive on and make plant food. So I can now back off putting just absolutely tons and tons of compost on. So this year, instead of bringing everybody's weeds and rubbish and junk to compost, I am going to be very selective about what I compost. So I'm putting in the hot bins a higher standard of compostable material, such as vegetable matter, just vegetable matter, virtually no weed whatsoever. So I don't have to worry about getting up to those really highly elevated temperatures to kill weed seed anymore. This plot doesn't really produce much weed. If I said over a year it produced half a barrel full of weeds, I'd probably be exaggerating a little bit. And certainly any weed growing on this soil virtually never goes to seed because it's removed when it gets to that height. It's easily visible, you know. There's so little weed, I can actually just drop it onto the paths and it'll break down there. Well, I'm making better compost this year. That's what I'm trying to say. Vegetable matter, the things I'm going to be bringing in are horse manure and straw, things like comfrey, things like perennial plants which I can get hold of, which tend to have deeper roots and will pull nice nutrients into the stems and leaves. I'll break them down as well. And so basically all I'll be composting is my own vegetable matter that comes above ground. Roots are always left in ground. Everything on the top is composted. The change of direction also this year extends to growing a lot more green manure that can just be composted in the hot bins, and living roots in the soil for the entire winter of some description, whatever that may be. And this is how I'm going to change. This is what I'm kind of transitioning into now in year 3, because this soil is becoming just so nice. It really is. And in the process of making this sort of really gold standard amazing compost, and what I'm going to use this really high gold standard compost for is to make sort of compost brews out of water, compost teas, where I am literally going to strip the fungus and bacteria out the compost and then water it directly onto the plants, the leaves, the stems and the soil, and we're just going to further boost the microbial life in the soil and protect the plants in the process. I'll possibly also be using a handful of this compost when I put transplants into the ground, little tiny hole, put the compost in, put the plant in, cover it back over. I'll be doing things like that this year instead of, you know, trying to get 2, 3, 4 inches of compost on every bed. I don't need to do that anymore now. So to that end, I've mentioned this in probably previous videos, I'm going to make a brand new hybrid hot bin which won't require turning. Because what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to increase the fungal life in the soil, the fungal hyphae, the mycorrhizal fungi. I'm trying to increase all of that, and I'm going to try and grow that in the hot bin. And the trouble is with constantly turning compost to get it back to an aerobic state, if it starts, you know, smelling and going anaerobic, you're then sort of breaking up all the fungal strands that are growing in the compost, and you sort of knock them back and you really kill them. And by the time the fungus is starting to make new pathways and networks through, you're turning it again and you're breaking it all up again. So my God, it's a wasp. A wasp right in your ear. Now that's lost my train of thought. Yeah, so what, basically, I don't want to destroy, I want to try and grow fungus in the compost. So I'm going to build these new hot bins, and I'm going to start in the next week, basically. I'm going to see if I can get something to do today. Probably have a little bit of a clear up in the polytunnel, I think, because it's lovely today. Finally been able to get the polytunnel vents open, just to get it really dried out in there. It's horrible and wet and dank. Well, this sun today is very, very much welcome. All right, guys, I'll see you quite soon. Bye for now.